Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm your host, Iris Goldfeder, and I am super excited about our guest today, Allie Beckmann. We met at I belong to the Dames. We have a conference in October called the Funference, and we met at the Funference, but we met again afterwards, and we just clicked, and we have continued clicking, and we are each other's spirits, sister in woo. So I am going to read her bio and bring her on. She's amazing, and you're going to love her as much as I do. Okay, so Allie Beckmann, RFA registered, is the founder of Beckman Financial, where mission-driven individuals and business owners are empowered to use money as a tool to turn their dreams into reality, one that reflects their values and vision for impact. As a comprehensive, flat-fee financial planner and behavioral coach, Allie partners with visionaries, creatives, and service-based entrepreneurs to bring order to their finances and guide them on an efficient path to financial security and wealth building. Her approach is uniquely holistic. I did that before too. It's uniquely holistic and deeply human, blending strategic expertise with emotional intelligence to create lasting impact. So without further ado, let's meet Allie. Hey.
Hi.
I can't say uniquely for whatever. It's like there are certain words that, before we got here, I was recording a commercial for my not-for-profit for our fundraiser coming up. And I was trying to say Gasstovecreative boutique, and it kept coming out boutique. and it was like, we're listening back to it, and it's like, and Gasstovecreative boutique. And I'm like, why the fuck can I say boutique? It was like, what is going on? So it came on with the unique. But how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, that's like such a no-brainer. I'm just like so excited because we, when we talked, the first time we talked like forever, and then the second time we talked forever, and you're just there's just so many, layers to you, and I adore you. I think you're phenomenal. So you're doing financial planning now, but you didn't always do that. So take us on your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm like, where do we begin?
I love it though. I mean, it's just so cool.
Yeah. I guess, looking back at my professional career, I started off in the theater. So I went to school. I studied theater for 4 years in college, got my degree, and then worked in the theater for a total of about 15 years. And I primarily was an actor and a director, doing plays, musicals, and everything in between. A 15-year theatrical career spans a lot of time and stuff. And I really, I'd say the first half of that career was more traditional entertainment, doing shows, regional shows, tours, again, just kind of straightforward entertainment. And then about halfway through my career, I started turning more towards experiential and immersive art. I really have always been passionate as an artist about creating spaces where the audience has more agency to co-create and engage. So I got more interested in immersive art, experiential art, just creating those spaces where everyone can have their own experience. And then that led me into doing something called participatory theater. Sometimes it's called also applied theater. And inside of that, I was doing work called Theater of the Oppressed, which is a very robust system with a lot of branches to it that takes the theater out of the theater and has different exercises and tactics and techniques and all sorts of things to work within an oppressed community, and again, empower them from within to identify problems and solutions. So I did that work for a while, and it was really, really meaningful and like totally the work of my soul. And then about the last 6 years of my theater career, I became a yoga teacher. That's been a really big part of my life. Next year will be my 15th year in a dedicated practice.
Wow.
And so I started teaching in 2016, about 6 years into my practice. And I moved to Colorado shortly after getting my teaching certificate and started teaching a lot.
Where were you before Colorado?
I was in New York City.
How come I didn't know that? Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't know.
I thought I knew
I
everything
moved
about
around
you.
a lot. In the
Okay.
theater, kind of, I was relatively nomadic, and then I ended up on the East Coast. I've spent time in upstate New York with a theater company, and then I eventually moved out to the city for
Where upstate?
a while as well. I lived in Auburn.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's upstate. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. Finger Lakes. Yeah.
Yep.
So I love it out there. But I started teaching yoga, and then all of a sudden that became as full-time as it could be. So I did that. And then I started my first official business in the health and wellness space, where I was doing corporate health and wellness trainings and really trying to break down the barriers of yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and just holistic health. So I was basically teaching people how to do yoga in their chairs, kind of removing that barrier of like, oh, I got to change clothes, and then I got to go drive to a studio, and then it's a 60-minute class, and then I got to go home, and blah, blah, blah. Just trying to teach people more awareness of the tools that they're walking around with in their bodies. Here's how your spine works, and here's how it moves, and here's how your breath works. Here's how mindfulness works.
You did that remotely?
I did do it remotely. I wasn't doing it remotely up front, but then COVID happened. And so I did switch to virtual trainings. I did more kind of team trainings, where I would teach people like, here's how your nervous system works. And here's why breathing has a real impact on regulating your central nervous system, and just like what the stress response is. And again, just kind of teaching people how their bodies work, because there's so much power within our bodies and our minds and our breath that so many people don't know how to access. So I've always been an educator, but I'm too non-traditional to be in a classroom every day. And so I'm all about, whether it's been in theater, whether it's been in yoga, and now in finance, all about just breaking down those barriers to education, making it more accessible, and using education as an empowering tool, right? Just teaching people how to take things into their own hands and take ownership and agency over their life, whether it's, through creative expression, holistic health, or like I said, now finance. And so COVID really was the catalyst for me to reevaluate my own life. COVID happened, all of my industries were impacted.
Sure. Yep.
Even, my fallbacks of like the restaurant industry, right? Like gone. So it was a moment in time that created a lot of stress on top of a lot of stress that I was already housing in my body that I was just really good at pretending wasn't there. And I basically hit a wall during COVID. I had a full-blown panic attack, which is, I can count on one hand, like the amount of panic attacks I've had in my life. It's not a normal occurrence for me. And I basically was able to see metacognitively, like my executive functioning go dark. I was like, wow, I'm like losing my ability to think straight. And I'm like watching it happen. I'm losing access to my creativity. I'm losing access to my organizational skills, which are like my biggest strengths. And so it was just a real awakening. And so I'm a big fan of, root cause analysis. And so I did some work to try and get to the root of like, okay, what's the root of the stress and the problems you're facing? And for me, it came down to a lack of financial stability. I've never cared about making money. And as a creative, I kind of opted out of making money, unfortunately. I accepted those stories that have been fed to so many creative professionals that like, you're not in it for the money and you're never going to make any money. So, and if you do make money, you're selling out. Like that, those stories,
wow.
No one explicitly said them to me, I had adopted. And what's crazy is that I've talked to so many other creatives since making this career change. And like so many of us all have these same stories that we've adopted. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I realized like by not prioritizing my own financial stability, that was the root of like most of the stress in my life. So I'm like, okay, we got to prioritize that. You gotta care about it, which is crazy because it's not that I was always very connected to my money. I was just never driven to make a lot of it. Right. And I never had an education of what to even do with it if I had extra. So, I basically set out to try and find a new career in the middle of 2020 and wanted to just prioritize like finding a job that would pay me, that would be consistent, and start solving that problem. So like in service of my creative goals, because I also have some pretty big, ambitious creative goals. And I'm like, they're going to need some money in order to make those happen. So,
yes,
sure. It was kind of like, how do we solve this problem so that you can keep creating? And it was terrible. I had a really hard time finding a job at that time. My background is weird and hard to like flatten on a piece of paper. And eventually through my network, someone reached out and said, hey, I've always thought you'd be really good at what I do, and I think you should talk to someone. And he was a New York Life agent and had worked at New York Life for like 15 years. And I laughed in his face just because I had always lived a very countercultural life, very non-traditional. And I'm like, man, that seems like the opposite of anything I've ever done. And I don't know, but I had no other options. And I'm always down to have a conversation. So I did. And that conversation was enough to make me curious to have a second conversation. And then became, 6 weeks of due diligence of exploring this opportunity. I was getting recruited by New York Life and Northwestern Mutual, like heavily. And I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do this. But at the end of the day, when I really evaluated the opportunity, I saw a lot of alignment between my core and this next phase being, being someone who's driven by mission and driven by impact. I saw a lot of opportunity to make an impact in people's lives. I mean, dealing with people's money is deeply impactful. Yeah. I saw an opportunity to stay an educator and learn my own education. Because again, I had no financial education. And so I'm like, well, I will learn a lot of the things that I also need to know and be able to continue teaching others. Being a business owner is important to me. Having autonomy, I saw an opportunity for that to continue to like be in control of my life. And so honestly, and hopefully like make a decent living. And so I said to myself, like worst case scenario is I try it out. And if it doesn't work, I'll probably have learned a lot. And then I'll go do something else like I always do. And, now 4 years later, almost to the date, it's going really well. And it's very aligned, like I said, with kind of my core mission and life, but also it's come full circle in a way that I would have never expected, being that, I now really love working with my community, working with creatives, working with entrepreneurs, working with people who identify as a misfit. I've always been a misfit. And, there's a lot of people.
Why we get along so well.
I know. There's a lot of, the financial industry can come off really exclusive and like, you don't belong here. Right. And that's how I felt. Like, again, I opted out of being like, I never even considered seeking advice because it just didn't feel like that was for me. Right. And now I'm in this space and I'm just, I don't know. Can we swear on this podcast?
Have you met me?
Okay. Basically, I'm like, fuck that. And there's
Michelle, you're welcome.
Like as a social justice mission-driven person, I'm like, man, there's a lot of room in this industry for me to bring that passion and experience and drive to create more equitable social systems and access inside of the financial industry, serve people who feel excluded, make things more accessible, break down barriers to education. So I'm like, wow, I could have never predicted the alignment, but I feel so fortunate for that initial connection and for someone who saw that, opportunity within me. And I'm grateful I took a very big risk to do it. And yeah, glad it's working out. And that being said, it probably won't be the last thing I do. So
I mean, no, but I really believe that we're where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times fast. I truly believe that because,
yeah,
I look at like my past lives, right? Like, all the things that I've done. And when I say past lives, I mean in this life. I'm not getting,
yes.
I'm explaining to the audience. So they're like, oh, she's talking past life. No, I mean like all my past lives in this life, because I've lived so many freaking lives in this life alone that it's like insane, right? So, and I look at what I'm doing now, all the things that I'm doing now. So my business, the podcast, the not-for-profit that I run, with my friend, and like all of these other things that I do and that I get to do. And it's like so cool, right? It's like, I get to run this marketing agency where it's basically, playing Jenga or Tetris and like putting all the, pieces together. And I get to do all this like really cool stuff. And, when anybody that I have on the show, it's like, we're where we're supposed to be. You're where you're supposed to be right now. It may be different a year from now. You know what I mean? But what you're doing is making such a difference. And the fact that, there's actually somebody in finance who wants to explain the shit to somebody, because like I told you I was homeless when I was 19 and all that, right?
No.
Didn't we? What the hell did we talk about? I felt like we talked about, okay, so we're going to
everything and nothing.
I mean, okay, so the next time we talk, I'll tell you everything. But I was homeless when I was 19, and my mom never gave me, she didn't, no offense, we know it's true. She never wanted to have kids, so I never had the tools. I was never given the tools to be a functioning person in society.
Wow.
So when I was like 11, she threw me in like a boarding school for 3 years so I would be out of her hair. And then we moved to Florida, and then she moved in with a boyfriend when she was 15. So, I ended up with my GED. I never graduated high school because, she left me alone. I didn't know about a checkbook. So I finally opened up a bank account and I had a checkbook, but I thought that you didn't run out of money until you ran out of checks.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I wasn't taught the basic shit, right? So, I was writing all these checks, and then finally it's like, your check is bouncing. I'm like, what do you mean? And, so my aunt was, called down to this liquor store in where we lived. And, he said, she's like bouncing checks, and because she doesn't understand that when the money's gone, it's not when the checks are gone, it's when the money's gone. And my aunt was like, oh my God. So to be somebody, first off, to the fact that I'm where I am now is like a miracle, right? So that alone, but the fact that I wasn't even given those tools to know that this is what an account is, and this is when you write a check. And oh my God, when the ATM cards came out, I was better by then, I kind of knew, but I remember it was like, oh my God, I think it was like 1984 or 85. There was like a glitch in the system, and the ATMs were spitting out money. So if you went to take out $100, it was giving you like $1,000. And so people were like, woohoo. And I'm the only, one of the only honest people who were like, well, shit, this isn't what I took out. And I think it was like European American Bank, if I remember right. And I remember walking back into the bank with the money. And I was like, because I was at the ATM, I took out 100 and it gave me like way more. I was worried I was going to overdraw my account, right? Because it gave me all this money.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening. So I went into the teller and I was like, hey, I went to take out 100 and they gave me this. And the guy looked at me and he's looking in my account and he goes, it just shows $100. I'm like, yeah, I know, but they gave me this. And he was like, I mean, I can't, he goes, I can't take it from you because then it will make my drawer go over. So I was like, well, fuck. Okay, thank you. So
You tried.
And I tried, right? It was like hilarious, but it was happening all over. So like all these people, so I have no idea like how much money they lost that day and how much people. And then I think it was like a couple of weeks later, they were like, if you receive this much money, and it was like, nope, sorry. I mean, I tried, and I went into the bank and I was like, I tried giving them back the money. He didn't want to give it back to me. It's gone. Like, it's not here anymore. So, but the fact that I really wonder how many people are walking around and have no idea about savings, about IRAs. Like my wife is my retirement. Yeah, I mean, she is. And then I have enough life insurance that, don't get any ideas, but I have, enough life insurance that when I go, she's well taken care of, but also I'm trying to grow Gasto to the point that I get it to, mid 7 figures or whatever. And then I can sell it and then she's, happy. And, that's my goal. So, but if you would have told the 19-year-old who was writing, checks that.
Well, and again, part of the problem is how many people are walking around not knowing things. The majority, but there's some sort of, again, this like pervasive silent culture where everyone feels like they should know what to do and what things are called and all the jargon. Everyone feels like they're supposed to know, but no one ever gets taught this stuff. I mean, such a slim percentage get a financial education from their family, regardless of economic status. It's a very few. And, more and more, I will say, they're starting to put more effort into personal finance in education. But there's so much shame people carry around their money because, again, they just like feel like they're supposed to know all this stuff. They feel like they're supposed to be further ahead. I mean, I felt that way too. But no one feels safe to ask. Yeah. And like, a lot of the industry hasn't always made it welcoming too. There's a lot of, there's been and are bad actors in this industry. There's people taking advantage of people. Not everybody, of course. There's like plenty of awesome financial advisors out there, but this industry has a rap for a reason. There's not always
like lawyers, right? I mean, same thing.
Yeah. And so it just turns people off from it. And then, they get to their later years and realize they've never taken a look at their finances. They have no idea how they're set up for retirement. And at that point, you have way less time on your side, which really makes everything a lot harder. So
it's scarier. I mean, it's scary.
Yeah. Well, and way just more pressure. And so I studied trauma-informed care in 2016 and have been a facilitator in that practice since then, both in yoga and on the theater side. And it's so ingrained in my operating at this point that, I would say my practice is really informed by trauma-informed care. And the whole core of that practice is creating a safe space, because if people don't feel safe, they can't learn. They can't explore new things. They can't take risks. They can't, try a new choice. Like safety is the foundation of empowering people to take choice and make choice and learn. And so knowing that there's like such tough energy already in the financial industry, it's exciting for me to be able to like bring my past lives from this life into this industry and be like, wait a minute, there's so many things wrong. And a lot of my skills from my past lives can be they inform just creating a different experience for people so that they don't dread their money. They don't dread their conversations with me. It's empowering. It's exciting. It's maybe we have fun even, there's just a lot of opportunity, I think, in the industry to be more inclusive, to democratize the access to everything. And it doesn't always have to come down to the financial strategies you're employing. It's how are you talking to your clients? How are you inviting them into your practice? How are you engaging with them over time? What is your process? What is the client experience? That's where so much meaning and impact can happen. Because again, I do a lot of work on the emotional side of money and the tactical side of money, because in my opinion, if I'm not addressing my client's behavioral and emotional relationship with money, how am I supposed to support them in implementing the plan I'm giving them? I don't want to just give them a plan and say, here you go, good luck with it. No, I show up I'm just as much a financial coach as I am a financial planner, where I want to get to know their personality, their ins and outs, so that I can take that into consideration when I'm, creating their implementation plan. How are we going to get this done? How, letting that part of the process be really unique to the client, supporting them in the best way that they need. So again, that they just feel safe. That's the foundation of it. And it doesn't matter, your financial situation. I see this with people who don't have a lot of money, and I see this with people who do have a lot of money. The shame doesn't discriminate.
It's I hear you, speaking, and for me, it's the same with my clients. It's the client experience, right? It's how do you make them feel?
Yeah.
And, whether it's finance, whether it's, in marketing, or, what I do, and, anything, any industry that you're in, or any solopreneurship or whatever, and your client doesn't have a good experience, they're not staying with you, right? So you have to, and they know whether you care or not. I was just talking to somebody about this. It doesn't matter. I was just talking to somebody about this, and we were talking about how people can tell whether your caring is true or performative.
Sure.
100%, right? And so my clients know that I care for them. I have on my vision board, it's I have, my clients are happy, my clients are safe. And to me, that's the most important thing, is that they are safe. They feel safe. They're putting their marketing in my hands. They're putting, whatever they're putting in my hands because they trust me. And you're goddamn right. I'm going to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah.
That they're well taken care of.
Yes.
And so when you talk about money, hell yeah, you want to be fucking safe.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
especially now.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what the fuck is coming, in 2025.
Yeah.
It's a scary time. People are afraid to spend money right now. They don't know what to do because they don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
And I just read that, and I'll say it on here, I don't care. The schmucko was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be able to lower fucking grocery prices. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
And now I have people, coming to me like, well, that's not what he said. And I was like, this is on you. I've been telling you for 2 years. This is on you.
Fun fact, seeing prices go down is a really bad indicator for the economy. People think that they want to see prices go down,
That's a good point.
Overall, we actually don't want to see that. So, teaching moment, inflation is actually, it's not the price, it's not the increase of prices, it's the rate at which prices increase. That's what that percentage is measuring, how fast are prices increasing. It's not the actual increase themselves. So when we're trying to get inflation down to a 2%, we're slowing the pace of inflation. So that's teaching moment number one. Teaching moment number two is what we want is to stabilize the rate at which prices are going up, which means we don't see eggs jump from $2 to $8 overnight, right?
That just kills me. I'm sorry. I mean,
rather, we're seeing a slow and steady pace of like
Right.
prices rise over time. That's normal and expected sign of a healthy economy. If we start seeing price, so like when people want inflation to be taken care of, again, they think that that means prices are going to go back down to where they were. That's not going to happen. I'm sorry to say, you guys, but like those days are gone. We're not going to go back down. A few like oil, right? That's a thing that can go down. But for the most part, prices won't go back down. Really, we just want them to stabilize and not keep getting higher so fast. So it's changing kind of the expectation of what we're looking for to judge the economy. And like I said, when prices start going down, that's quite a bad economic indicator, which is something we don't really want to see. So, Fun fact.
Okay, cool. And for those of you who are...
Everyone's like, please stop talking about this now.
No, I think this is important stuff because, I mean, I want to know.
Yeah.
But just for people who are watching and seeing me eat things, right, I'm like eating. So if you're listening, I'm eating mini M&Ms, and I'm like one at a time because right before this, I had to have blood taken. And rather than stick a giant Raffaello in my face and, be chewing on that, I'm slowly eating because I know people that are watching are like, what the fuck is she doing? So I'm eating mini M&Ms. And you asked if you could curse on this. So that to me is so interesting because people look at, like gas, right? Yeah. So gas is going to go down. We know already gas is going to go down because,
right,
it's going to go down. But when we look at, if we get political, we look at Biden, he was using all American oil. Yeah. And that's why, the price wasn't down. Now we're going to be using, Schmucko's Buddy's oil. Sorry, I can't even say his name.
That's okay.
And so, the price is going to go down because, he's, whatever. So, but, somebody was like, well, it costs so much more for me to feed my family. And I don't feel that because it's Heather and myself and our dogs. Mm. So, and our dogs are spoiled. So they get the best food that money can buy. It is what it is, right? Yeah. They just do. I'm a former chef. Oh. So, I'm bougie. So we eat well. Like she'd be happy eating cereal for dinner. And I'm like, no, we're not, we're not doing that. But I don't feel it as much. I feel it like if we do an Instacart or we have a thing here called, Payless. So, you do the grocery delivery. That's when I feel it because then I'm giving them, I don't give less than a 20% tip, which makes her cry. Sure. But if our grocery bill is like $150, now I'm giving like I'm adding $35 onto my, and they love me. When they see my phone number come in, they're like, hot dog, let's, like they fight over who the hell's going to deliver to us. But, so that's when I feel it. But I can see where a family of 4, right, who's going to have to feed their kid. They're not going to be eating bougie like we are. So I'm sure they're, saving something. But, they still have to get all the things. Yeah. So, so I don't know, but I think that's so important to know what inflation is as opposed to what people think inflation is.
Yeah. Something that's been fascinating this year to observe is the market and the economy have been historically good in 2024. The stock market has had one of its best overall years. It's had some of its best overall days. The economy, GDP growth has blown predictions out of the water. I mean, from all of these angles, the economy has been really strong this year.
And everybody's telling me that
consumer sentiment has been the lowest. Like it's been so low. Consumer sentiment is just now picking up. And, we're recording this before it's going to come out. So who knows where it'll be in a couple months. But consumer sentiment has been so low, which has been fascinating because I'm like, it's interesting because all of these other indicators are really quite positive. And that to me is just an interesting point, right? It's like, what is informing that disconnect? And I don't really know. I mean, I think some of it is like where we're getting our information from, and it's not all trustworthy or factual, or it's too myopic in its perspective and it's only focusing on one factor or anecdotes, because of course I want to be mindful. Like there's people who have been struggling to find jobs, there are still people like, I want to acknowledge the struggle is real and it's felt. And I also want to encourage people to like fact check their sources or reach out to, people who are in this line of work for a living who can give them more information, just because it's just been an interesting, I don't really have anything other to say than it's just been interesting to observe. And it makes me continue to come back to like education. We just need more education. People don't know.
You need proper education.
Yeah, they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what things actually mean. They don't know how it relates to them. And I don't blame them. Like, again, where are we even supposed to get this information? And it's exhausting. Like, who actually wants to go? I mean, right? Like, it takes a particular person to go like seek out financial education. I get it. But this is where I see so much opportunity to just, again, create more accessible channels for education where people can get reliable information, help them learn, and help them just strengthen their own internal guidance system of like what they're paying attention to, what it means for them. So, yeah.
So, we know a lot of entrepreneurs. We know a lot of people who, they have their own businesses and all of that stuff. And one of the questions that I was like asking on here is, especially in today's climate, right? Like right now things are good, but by the time this airs, it'll be January, I don't know, in a month or whatever. Like, what advice would you have for somebody who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh my gosh. What a good question. I like spilled tea into my nose. Sorry.
Okay, I'm still eating M&Ms so that I don't pass out. So we're a great team right now today.
We're great. We're on the top of the world. I think my
color's coming back though. So
yes, I think the first piece of advice I would give someone who's considering being an entrepreneur is like, how much do you want it? The internal motivation has to be there because like you've got to know your why, and it has to be deeply meaningful because the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, how hard it is to build a successful business and get it off the ground. It is so hard. And there are so many challenges and setbacks, and there's just, the mental and emotional game of being an entrepreneur, I think is one of the hardest parts of it. And so if you don't have a deep connection to why you want to be an entrepreneur and what it is that you'll be doing, you're not going to last. Like your internal fire and fuel will ultimately be the greatest, sustainable factor in like, that long-term success. So I think you really got to check in with like how bad you want it and like why, so I'd say start there. And then secondly, like being a financial advisor, like I have to talk about, setting yourself up, like ideally you have a savings cushion. Ideally you can support yourself a little bit in the beginning. That hasn't always been the case for me. Adds a lot of stress. It adds a lot of stress. So ideally you have some sort of support, either your own savings. Ideally, you're not tapping into your retirement accounts for that. But it's like cash savings, emergency savings, or easily liquidated savings, like I said, that aren't retirement accounts. Or a partner that's able to also support you or buffer some of it. Prudent advice is like have a year's worth of living expenses saved up to help yourself get through that first year, because it will take time. And then I guess too, what comes to mind is, I don't know, I know there's advice where it's like, just do it, just start, just start. And I think, yes, and I did that with my first business. I started before I really knew what it was that I wanted to do. I was just so ready to like do it. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in getting your shit together and like having a plan, at least some semblance of a plan, before you really start hitting the ground running. There's no shame in like keeping your day job while you build your business plan, while you start getting those initial structures set up until you're ready to take the full leap. There's something so real about creating structures of safety when you are taking a creative risk. And I would call entrepreneurship a creative risk. Right. And so it's like, because when you don't have that safety, there's just so much constriction and fear. And when you're operating from a place of fear, again, your higher functioning goes dark. You can't access it. So then you're not making decisions from your best place of judgment and wisdom. And that can be a slippery slope in itself. So
you become like reactive instead of responsive, right?
Yeah. And and there's like this urgency that can sometimes, and sometimes desperation, which then can really get in the way of real traction and movement forward. So I think a question that I love asking my clients too is like, what do you need to feel safe? Like that is such a spectrum for all of us. Some of it, know what that number is financially for you. Like how much cash in the bank will make you feel safe that you could just like easily get tomorrow. What's that number? But also like what other structures do you need to make you feel safe? Is it an accountability person? Is it having a really intentional conversation with your partner to be like, yo, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And this is what I think I'm going to need from you. And then getting like a consent on that, how, like, who do you need in your life? Community when you're starting off as an entrepreneur, or even when you're not, just anytime as an entrepreneur, like who you have around you is so important. So just evaluating like, what do you need to feel safe? I think could go a long way so that, again, you can like get ahead of it, be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
As best you can, of course,
Right. I mean, it's daunting. And we say this all the time, if you want to know what you're made of, become an entrepreneur. Because it brings all the things out. And I see so many people now that, here that were entrepreneurs that are looking for work because they're afraid. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier this week. Today's Wednesday, so Monday. And, they were like, I'm looking for a job. And I said, are you looking for a full-time job or a part-time? They were like, no, full-time. And I went, oh, so you're like getting rid of your business? And they're like, well, I guess I'll make that my side hustle. And that kind of, made me go, well, shit, because like, I'm very transparent. I've had a couple of lean months and I haven't had lean months in 2 years. But people are, afraid to spend, or now it's the end of the year and they've done all their spending. So now they want to start in January, which is great. It's a couple of weeks away, which is nuts. Like I can't wrap my brain around that, but it is what it is. And it's like, it's just so different because I look at it and I remember when I first started this thing, over 10 years ago. And when we first started, when it was a bad month, it was a bad month. It was just like there was like nothing coming in. Now, I have my, monthly stuff coming in, but, more, the more that, usually comes in consistently, like the new client, the 2 new clients, whatever, hasn't happened in the past couple of months. I've gotten 2 new clients in the past 3 months. And usually it's like 1 to 2 new clients a month. And so that's been a little weird. And I spoke to one person who was going to become a client, but they're Mexican. And they're like, I don't even know if I'm going to be here next year.
Oh my
How
God.
fucked up is that?
Wow.
Like, and I was like, holy crap, you're not wrong.
Wow.
And for people to have to worry about that, that totally just completely blew my mind. And they're naturalized. But as we know, the little Nazi, his little buddy who's a Nazi is like, well, I'm going to, even denaturalize people. And it's like, how the hell can you do that?
Right.
So there's so much uncertainty. And by the time this thing airs, Project 2025 could already well be like, who the hell knows? Like we have no idea what's going on. But when she said that, I just like looked at her and I was like, can I hug you? Because I don't even know what else to say at this point. And she was like, yeah, and I did. And I was just like, I remember driving home just gobsmacked. And I think, it takes a lot to get me speechless, right? I was just like completely, oh my God. And, when I look at, the population here in Lafayette, there are a lot of Mexican business owners that want to grow their businesses, but now they don't even know if they're going to be here. Like what
yeah.
So that kind of, it shook me, number one, but number two, it kind of helped me put things into perspective of, why things are slowing for me. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And what people are dealing with.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I'm a game-owned business, so who the hell knows, like we may have to move to a blue state. I have no idea because I am in like Indiana and that shit is red and our people coming in are like worse than Palpatine. So, it's kind of crazy.
I think, I deal with risk all the time, right? Like that's an essential element of my job is balancing risk and reward, evaluating risk, mitigating risk, taking calculated risk, the trade-off, So something that I always, in all of my meetings, we always have time to talk about like what's on your mind, what's concerning you, what kind of risks are you concerned about, or just in general, what are you concerned about? But the first question I always ask is like, what's within our control? Because a lot of things that are giving us fear, a lot of times there's a lot that we can't even do about it, So I think bringing that focus back to oneself of like, what can I control in this? Again, can just shift us from that fear-based powerlessness stance to feeling empowered, right? Like taking control of my own life. What can I do? Well, I can make sure like my foundation doesn't have any cracks in it, whatever that means for you, right? Savings, debt management, liquidity, access to cash, like basic stuff when it comes to like money stuff, at least. So I think just always shifting back to, start with your own gas mask. What can you control? Start there. And then even just like taking those small steps on things that you do have control over can totally change the energy of it all, and then that like, it just, again, it shifts us from that fear-based thinking to empowered thinking where it's like, but I am still in control of certain things. Even if, on certain days, the only thing you can control is your breath. But you know what? You can always control your breath. You can control how you feel. You can control how you react. Our emotional responses are choices. So there's always something that we can come back to, no matter how small, but it still can make that like lasting ripple impact to just shift us out of that mindset, to get us thinking productively, solution oriented thinking rather than powerless. I feel like we're in like this increasing blame culture right now. Everyone just wants someone else to blame, which like, I get it. It's fine. And not always the most productive energy, because again, it puts you in a seat of powerlessness where it's like, well, how is that actually helping you? So it's like bringing it back to oneself. I think in those moments where we feel powerless, which is a totally valid feeling. I don't want to, it's valid. There's uncertainty all around us, but that's also always going to be true. So
yes,
it's like, what can we control? What can we do? And then taking it even a step further, like what I do with my clients, where it's like, well, what are your concerns? What are your risks? And how do we start being then specific to put like protection against those risks? Mm-hmm. How do we get ahead of it so that this is like my job, essentially, if the worst case happens, you're still going to be okay. Ideally, we're setting you up for that so that you don't have to worry about the worst case happening. Because even if it does, we've got a plan, you know?
That's, And I think now more than ever is when people like need your services, right? They need that, partner that will help them be reassured and will be able to guide them and get them to that comfort level that they seek because everything is uncertain. So, so when, God, I have like a million questions, but when, like, what advice would you have for somebody who's like, they've been doing this a while and they've made X amount of money and, they've put some money away, but like you were talking earlier, like not everybody knows like the right thing, to do. And I don't want you to give, the cow away with the milk. So, but, like because of I spoke to a lot of financial people this year, not for my business, but just in general through here or getting ready to invite them on the podcast. And I didn't invite them on the podcast. Well, just because of, they were those people that you said, we're talking about fear. Mm-hmm. And they were very fear-based. They were very like, well, the market's crashing and you're never going to get a house at this again. And you're never going to this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. No, we're good. And most of them, by the way, were guys. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Not surprised. I mean, only 20% of advisors are women. So
it's, I remember I spoke to one guy and I said, yeah, my wife got an offer to move to another state, but it was a lateral move. And, I think we paid like 3% for, interest on our house. And at the time it was like 7 and 8. And I'm like, we would have to get half of our, like we wouldn't be able to do it. And so we didn't do it. But, I was talking to this guy and he's like, oh, you better plan on living there for like forever. And I went, what are you talking about? He goes, well, the market's never coming down and you're never gonna. And I went, I don't know that. I mean, it's already coming down. I know it's not going to come down, 5% in a year. If it does, we're kind of screwed. I mean, there's a huge, and that I already knew without even you saying that. That's like,
right.
But if in 5 years it comes down 3% or 2%, you know what I mean? Like, we don't know what's going to happen with the Fed and all that stuff. So,
right.
But I was like, that is like so totally negative to say, like, we will never leave here. It was like, and I'm happy where we are. I have like my woods. We have a very nice house. Pups are comfortable. We have a fireplace. That's all I care about. So, but, certain financial people are very fear-based. Like they want to scare the crap out of you. And it's like, So it's like, so why would I want to work with you? Not you, but him. I was like, why in God's name would I want to work with you if you're sitting here scaring the shit out of me?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was just like it was just a very weird kind of thing, because you seem very, the glass is half full as opposed to half empty. And that's how I kind of look at stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think you're keen to pick up on that fear-based tactic. And, from my time moving through the financial industry before I was able to go fully independent where I am now, those are a lot of the sales tactics that are taught. It's kind of making people, talking over them to make them feel like they need you. It's like, oh my gosh, if I talk over them, then they're going to realize how much they don't know and how much they need me. And I think too, it's like playing on people's fears, again, makes them feel like they need their advisor. And this is not every advisor, but I know that those are sales techniques that are widely taught in this industry, and that have been widely taught for a very long time. And I think, I'm coming at it as an artist, as a social justice artist. I was a trained professional critical thinker. And so I'm looking at this industry with that lens, and just having come from like the land of the people, if you will, I know that the consumer landscape is changing. What people are looking for, what they want, what they're expecting out of an advisor is changing. They care about relationships. They care about how things feel.
I just wrote an article on that today, just in general.
Yes. And people are more and more empowered to learn and educate themselves on their own.
Yeah.
So the massive information gap is getting reduced because of the internet, because of just people's ability to teach themselves. And I believe that trend is not going to go down. And I think people are smart. People are smart to that, So, I just don't think, again, when it comes to like sustainable business practice, I don't think that's a sustainable way to go, both in terms of like your clients, but also your own energy. I mean, oh my gosh, like
100%.
Well,
and it's like,
feel terrible to be that person all the time. I don't know.
And it's like the like the marketing people who, go into a business and they're like, oh my God, what the hell were you thinking to do that? And it's like, oh my God, why would you ever say, like, it's like fear-based and, negative.
It's shame.
Yeah. And it's like,
condescension.
Why in God's name would you do that? I walk into a business and I look at what they've done well.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what have you done so far that's worked? And that's the first thing I ask them. What have you done that's worked? Well, I don't know. Well, let's look at it.
Yeah.
You're doing this. Hey, you did a great job here. This is great here. You did, and this is really good here. Okay, there's a hole here, so we can help you there. Right. So it's pointing out their attributes and what they're good at, as opposed to shaming them. Like, I will never forget, I was working with somebody who, not anymore, but I was working with them, and we were talking to a business, and he said, yeah, I did this and this. And he literally was like, what the fuck were you thinking? And I was like, oh my God, why would you, how can you, no.
Try again.
No. And I apologized, but I was like, excuse that. That's not who we are. And it was just like this whole.
Well, because that's the thing. It's like, you could also ask, like, what were you thinking? It's like you could even ask the same question to get into that person's mind.
What were you thinking when you did that?
Totally different.
Not what were you thinking? It's in the inflection, right?
It's a totally different tone and intention. And I think a lot of advisors can fall prey to the trap of like, there's one way to do things. And it's like, that's just not true. The numbers, for some people, the numbers are not the bottom line. Some people, their emotional values outweigh the numbers sometimes in certain situations. And there's validity to that. If I see it as my job to help people weigh their options, where it's like, let's just objectively look at your choices and weigh out the pros and cons so that you can have all the information you need to make the decision that's going to align with your values, your goals, your lifestyle the best. And that might look differently than that person's choice or plan. But this is why I'm such a big proponent of like aligning personal values with financial planning, because it has to make sense for you. Not everyone cares about the same things. And so your money, your plan, your financial plan, and what you're doing with your money is going to look differently based on those values, based on your goals, based on what you care about, as it should. And again, it's like you should be able to feel safe enough to talk to your advisor about that whole spectrum of what informs financial decision making, which, emotions are a big part of that. Emotions are, I would argue, for most consumers, money is mostly emotional. That's why we have advisors, to be like, yes, and let's also look at some other data points and then bring them together and find whatever that best harmony is for you. Yeah. But there's so much shame-based. And I think, I think with every industry, there can be people who get maybe a little lazy. They aren't willing to kind of get creative in that approach to problem solving and analyzing. I always like to remind people, like in financial planning, there's no one way to do anything. Everything is a trade-off. Everything is a trade-off, right? And so just like knowing that up front, I think can reduce a lot of the stress and like analysis paralysis, where it's like, okay, the trade-off of looking at another house. It's like, great. Well, the trade-off is either we stay in our current house, keep that low mortgage, but maybe then we're giving up, moving to a different place that maybe we would prefer, but we're choosing this option. Or the trade-off is I'm moving and I'm giving up my really low interest rate, but
we weren't. It was West Virginia.
Right? It's like
it would have been worse. So
just great. And so, but it's
for us,
a hypothetical example. Yeah. It's just, I think sometimes people think, again, it's just like it's easy to feel like there's one right way to do it, and then if you don't do it that way, you're wrong. And that's just not the case. I mean, there's a million ways to find harmony. There's a million ways to adapt. There's a million ways to, create a plan and a structure for you. Your financial plan should be as unique as you are, Yeah,
no, 100%.
Yeah.
I can't believe we are over an hour. So thank you for taking the time out of your day.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Oh my God. Yeah. And we clearly have like way more to talk about, but, hang on, I'm going to say goodbye to actually, the last question I ask everybody, is what lights your fire?
Oh my gosh. How do I answer that question?
However.
What lights my fire? I'm trying to get to the root of my answer. Honestly, I think the core of my fire is my creativity. My creative practices, my creative goals, my creative process. That is so much a core of my reason for being. And so a lot of the things I do these days, because I've learned the hard way of what can threaten my creativity. Now a lot of the things that I do are in service of. And so when things get hard for me, it's coming back to that like most precious gem inside and like remembering that, everything comes back to serve that, because when I am in alignment and flow with my own creativity, my health and well-being is where it needs to be. And then that informs everything else. Like I think it's the core of my spirit and my well-being, which keeps me going doing all the other things.
Cool. Well, thank you for being on. Hang on one second. I'm going to say goodbye and then I'll come back.
Okay.
Everybody, thank you for hanging out again for an hour plus. Season 4 is going to be no different than the other seasons, clearly, right? So I hope that you adore Allie as much as I do now. And you'll be able to contact her. Everything will be in the show notes. So appreciate you all. Like, download, review. Please give reviews for every episode, and if you can in the comments, like leave a nugget that kind of stuck with you, so that we know what you guys are looking for. So appreciate you all, and until next time, go out and find what lights your fire. See ya.